Good afternoon, evening, morning, all. That's it. Finally, the season is over. We finished 19th. We didn't get relegated. And I think we can all agree that we are looking forward to next season because it cannot possibly get any worse. Can it? So before that, we've obviously got a lot that's going to be happening within the next couple of weeks. There will be a decision made on the manager. That'll be something that I'll talk about or write about on a different day, because otherwise it's going to take up far too long. But the purpose of today's video is to look at all the players that we've got out of contract, and including the loanees. I'm going to chuck them in there as well and see who would keep, who would release, and why. I've used Transfer Market because obviously we don't know the player lengths of contract, but we will look at who they say are out of contract and kind of go from there. So starting in goal, we have both of our goalkeepers out of contract, Jack Rose and Liam Roberts. Personally, I would only offer one of them a deal. I think you can guess who I'm going with on this one, but I would offer Jack Rose a contract and I would let Liam Roberts go. It's actually something that One Pod Beyond spoke about on their last podcast. I feel that there is a goalkeeper in Roberts, but I don't think he's going to progress anymore at Walsall. I think it's come to the point where both parties now need to move on and let him kind of find a rhythm and a system at a new club. I also feel that keeping both of these keepers, they're both 25, 26, I can't quite remember. They're both going to be wanting similar wages, especially given that Rose has had a lot more game time recently. And I think we kind of need to go back to having a slightly more experienced keeper and maybe a younger hot prospect. So for that, I'd keep Rose. Keep him playing. I think he's shown enough consistency this season that he can be the number one goalkeeper and that he can be the player that plays, sort of 3/4, 90% or even all of our league games next season. He doesn't have that real clanger in him, or at least not to the extent that Roberts does. And I feel that in Rose we have a more commanding goalkeeper, one that has a bit more trust in the defence as well and has been quite key to the clean sheets. I mean, a lot of the goals that are conceded I wouldn't say have necessarily been down to him or that I would be expecting him to do better. So yeah, I would keep Jack Rose and I would release Liam Roberts, which I've seen a bit recently about Rose and not sure whether the fans would keep him, so I'd be very interested to see who would keep Rose and who would let him go. I think the verdict has already been made about Liam Roberts. Right, moving on to defence. Starting with Matt Sadler. Now, Sadler's been fantastic this season. I think we forget that he is 35, 36 and that he did play, I think it was 21-ish games in a row, Saturday, Tuesday. His last performance for us a couple of games back wasn't great, but I think he's probably burnt out, to be fair, and I don't think any of us can blame him for that. Personally, I think I would keep him there as a backup. I think he's going to be at the club in a coaching role regardless of whether he stays on as a player. So I think it's a case of keep him there as a backup if needed, maybe for cup games, maybe the whatever it's going to be called, the EFL trophy. Let him still influence the playing side of things if we have injuries or if we desperately need him to play, because I still think he can offer a lot to the team. I think he looks good in a back two and a back three, and with the turnover in the squad that's going to need to be, I think keeping him in will be good for the whole team. Next up, Clark Scar and Leak. Now, according to Transfer Market, all three are out of contract, which I assumed about Scar and Clark. Leak signed a new deal last summer, so I would assume that there's maybe an option for another year, but if there isn't, then absolutely would be signing Leak. I think he's been fantastic since coming in. 20 years old, played in two of the toughest fixtures that you could play, and he's been part of a team that aren't performing well, and yet he's impressed. I think it would be interesting to see him in a team that's performing well and that's playing better football to see how he can play. I think yesterday again he had a very solid outing and showed that actually he could be up to 20 games a season at the least. The balance here is with Sadler. If Sadler decides to retire, then I feel James Clark needs to stay because we need a bit of experience. The jury's been out on Clark since day one. Some people love him, some hate him. I quite like Clark. I think he's been a good captain. At times, yes, he has made mistakes, but he hasn't down tools. He's always given his all. I think he's a good captain, and I think that he has got another season left in him. So yeah, I would obviously keep Leak. I would keep Clark, and I would probably keep Scar as well. I think when you look at the defence, especially under Dutton, bear with, they did look better. They looked a lot better, and I think adding a bit more either side, both left and right, they're good League Two defenders. However, Scar is the one that I feel is more expendable to the team than Clark. I think the run of clean sheets, the better defensive displays came when he wasn't playing, and it came when a mixture of Sadler, Leak and Clark were. Scar didn't show a lot when he came back. However, that might just be catching up after injury. He's a player that, if we released him, I would agree with it, and if we kept him, I'd agree with it. I think at times he shows that he can be a good defender at this level, but then again, he's also shown that he has a mistake in him. So, yeah, which there's a few players that are a bit meh if we keep them, and he's definitely one of them. And I really like Scar. I think that he is always impressed in terms of his work ethic and his mentality. I just at times feel that we could probably get someone a bit better and maybe a little bit more consistent in. So yeah. Now in terms of fullbacks, again according to Transfer Market, Cockerell Mollett, Cameron Norman and Hayden White are all out of contract. Now the thing with the players that we signed last summer is we don't know whether they are on one-year deals, whether they have options or not. So I'm going to take it all as they're all out of contract. Cameron Norman I would keep. I think he showed in the first half of the season that he can be a very good player for us and a very consistent player in League Two. Now obviously we don't know what's happened behind the scenes to see him not playing, but I think that whenever he has played at right back, he has performed. He's not a central defensive midfielder, although you could see that he was trying, but he was just put out of position. That's not him. I also don't think he's a right midfielder. I don't know why he's being pushed to play at right mid as well. I think that Norman should be playing at right back, and that he is a good League Two right back that we do well to keep hold of. Now whether he will stay or not is a completely different story because of the way that he's sort of been frozen out of the team. Now that might be Dutton, and if Dutton doesn't stay, then it sort of opens the door again for Norman. I think the big thing with Norman is that this season is the most he's played in the EFL. He has struggled to get consistent game time, and when he was given consistent game time at the back end of last season and the start of this season, he's performed. And I think that's enough for him to get a new deal. Cockrell, Mollett and White, I think they should go. To be honest, I'd release both of them. Cockrell, Mollett just hasn't broken into the side. Whether that's because he's not had the opportunity to, and we've not seen him perform. But overall, I've not seen enough from Cockrell, Mollett to see him playing consistently at left back. Fitness as well, there's been question marks surrounding fitness and injuries, and I just feel it's probably time to part ways. And again, he's not young. He's 21 or 22, I believe, but he is at that age where he should be playing consistent football. I believe he's only a year or two younger than Melbourne, and Melbourne's shown a lot more. But we'll come on to loanees later. So I would release Cockrell, Mollett. The same with White. Yes, he's looked better the more that he's played, but overall I haven't seen enough from him to go, yes, he should be our starting right back. I think Norman should be our starting right back, and having both of them on the books, I think we'd be able to pick up a better right back as and when players are being released from other clubs. So defence, that is Sadler, yes, offer a deal, however his retirement is going to play a big part in that. Scar, if he's offered a deal, he's offered a deal. If he's not, he's not. Clark I would keep. Norman I would keep. Cockrell, Mollett, release. Leake, offer a new deal. White I would release. With all of these, obviously I'd love to know what everyone thinks in terms of individual players. Please don't shoot me down for my personal opinion. We move on to midfield. Sinclair, he has only played a handful of games, and in them, yes, he's battled hard and they've been more of your physical games, but I think it's clear to see that he's not got the legs anymore to be playing consistently, and I think that he is the type of midfielder that we don't need another Sinclair. We've got Perry and Kinsella who put a shift in and are a bit physical and win tackles. I don't think we need Sinclair. Alongside Perry and Kinsella, and obviously Osadibi and Bates, we are quite... Well, it's the only area of the pitch that we've got a lot of players. I think if we took Sinclair out and brought in a more of a creative midfielder, that would be a wiser decision. Or a more physical, taller midfielder, a real holding midfielder, which would allow Perry to maybe push forward a bit. I think that Perry's got talent to pick out a pass and to play slightly further forward in the central midfield. But the only way we're going to do that is in a midfield three with a dedicated defensive midfielder. However, my preference would be creative, and I think for that we need to sacrifice Sinclair. Where's McDonald? He's shown that he can be a good player. However, he's not shown it consistently enough. The thing with Wes is that we've not had a consistent winger that can challenge for his place. Last season he was the only out and out winger. This season we've had Wright on loan, and Osadibi has sort of featured all over. The same with Josh Gordon and the same with Holden. From a financial point of view, I think McDonald would be a cheaper option to keep. However, I would personally release him. I think he's very much a one-trick pony, and he's been found out this season. If he gives the ball away a lot, his goal involvement has been quite minimal, and he's been part of an attack. I know he's a midfielder, but he's played in an up front three. He's been part of an attack that just haven't created enough or haven't scored enough, and I think that says enough for him to be moved on. Really, he hasn't looked the same player since signing a deal last January. So for me, I would release Wes. Keeping on the subject of wingers, Jack Nolan. I'd keep Nolan. I think that he has looked bright. He has looked like, given a run of games, he could influence play. He, in his very few games, he's improved. He had a run of a couple of good results and then dropped off again. I would keep him. He's young. He's probably not going to be the most expensive player, and I know that's a bit of a cop-out, but it's something that we have to consider given the financial state at the club. Whether he will want to stay is a different matter, and again, this is the same thing as Norman with Dutton. I think under Dutton, neither Norman or Nolan will be offered a new deal. However, with Fullerton keeping an eye on younger players like Nolan, I think another manager coming in would see the talent, and I think give him another season to develop, to get more game time, and to potentially break into the first 11 like he was threatening to do 2 or 3 months ago. So Nolan I would keep. Next is Willis. I expect the club to keep hold of him, and I think again he's a young player that's just started on the fringes. Like Perry last season, give him another year to develop, to grow, and see if he can fit into the side next season. He's shown enough that, well, not that he's really played, but he's been involved in the squad enough to warrant keeping him as a younger player that we can bring on and can work with and develop. Next is Holden. So I wrote these out in a very strange order as I'm going through. Holden. It would amaze me if we only signed him for 1 year, or at least without the option of another year. However, it looks as though he's only on a 1 year deal. I would expect it to be extended. Obviously, Holden needs to stay. Absolutely. And if we don't offer him a new deal, or if there's not the option, then I think it'd be an absolute joke from the club's behalf to not offer Holden another deal, or to have put a clause in the club's favour. I will be very, very frustrated if, when the retained release list comes out, if Holden is on players offered a new deal. I feel that if we're buying Holden like we did last summer, there has to be a 2 year deal on the table, or an option in the club's favour. That will be a rant for a future date, if not. Then finally in midfield, both Jayden Campbell and Joe Fulks are out of contract. We haven't seen enough from the two of them to make an educated opinion, but what I feel is that both should stay. There is obviously going to be a push with youth from Fullerton, and hopefully with an increase in the coaching staff, the younger players will get more coaching. Campbell did okay pre-season. I would like to see him either loaned out. I know it's been difficult with the national leagues being a bit all over the place with COVID, and the same with Folks. Don't quite know how you pronounce his name, but I would offer both of them another deal, keep them for another year with an option for a further year. Try and get them a loan, try and get them some game time, even if it's in the EFL Trophy, and try and blood them in. So going back through the midfield, I would release Sinclair and Wes. I would keep Nolan and obviously Holden, and then the younger players, Willis, Campbell, Folks, I would keep, as I feel that they are talented and we will need squad depth. And in with that, we will need a younger under 21s style team that are ready to step up, especially if Fullerton's going to create a structure. Hopefully he will. Finally, the strikers. Lavery and Gordon. Both have contributed to a weak attack. Neither have even looked like threatening to be top scorer. For me, both can be moved on. I find that easier to say for Lavery because, yes, he in previous seasons has been proven in League 1 and League 2, but over the 2 seasons with us, he's really not lived up to any expectations. He's been poor, and I think probably it's time for him to move on. Gordon started the season as he finished last season, but since his injury he's not looked like the same player, and I don't know whether that's because he's been played out of position, whether because he's having to take the brunt of the attack and put the weight all on his shoulders, or what. Gordon, like Scar, is another, if they stay, they stay, fine. If they go, okay. The thing with Gordon is, will he want to stay? Which, probably, because he knows he's going to get game time. But for me, if I had to pick release or retain, I would release Gordon. He's just not shown enough, and he's not shown anywhere near the player that won Player of the Season last time out. And again, I think combined goals of 12 in the league, it's just not good enough. I would rather take a punt on different strikers that's maybe a bit fresher, a bit younger, a bit more up for the fight. I think Lavery and Gordon, for all their running, don't have the quality. Lavery especially has been very disappointing in his 2 seasons. So, totting it up in my head, that is Rose, Sadler I'm going to count, Clark, Norman, Nolan, Willis, Holden, Campbell, Folks, although I don't think you can really count all of those, so I'm going to say Nolan and Holden. The only ones that I would retain, I would release Roberts, potentially Scar, Cockerell, Mollett, White, Sinclair, Wes, Lavery and Gordon, which is 8 players. We know that a clear out's needed, but this does include the loan players. Ossior, good luck to him in all of his future endeavours, but it's just not worked. And I can see him leaving the EFL and going back. I think it was the French leagues that Oxford got him from, because it's just not worked out. Wright, I would like to see Wright in a better attacking unit. I mean, his best games came, I think it was his only game with Adebayo. They looked to link up really well, and I would love to see what Wright can do with a real goal scorer at the top end of the pitch. So I would try and get Wright back. But again, if he doesn't, then he doesn't. It's not a loanee that we've had in that I'm desperate to keep. I would get Melbourne, for the reason being that defensively we've looked better, and I think keeping a core of the defence, adding a different left back to compete, another right back alongside Norman to compete, and another centre back would be good. I feel that Leake and Clark would be a good centre back pairing going on for the season ahead, with Sadler potentially there and another centre back. However, if Sadler retires, I think Scar, Leake and Clark with another centre back would be fine going forward. And then in midfield, centrally we look okay. We need creativity, and that's wings and in the middle of the park. And then we need goal scorers, absolute goal scorers. So I would sign Melbourne given the opportunity, and hopefully he would sign. I think the fact that he's had a consistent run, he's been steady, he's not set the world alight, but do you know what? With the rebuild on our hands, I would take a team of 11 steady players for next season. So that's the list. Let me know whether you agree, disagree, whether you feel that I'm completely way off, whether you think there's a screw loose, or whether you think it's actually fairly accurate. There was a couple of questions that came in. Luke Jones asked, what would I like to see done differently next season? Consistency, just some form of consistency, whether that be formation, a style of play, personnel. We've never really seen a consistent team, and the times we have seen a consistent team, we've played better, and then it's all been thrown away. I would like to see just some form of identity, some form of consistency, so that the runs that we have where we don't win in that, we need to play through that. But we also need to keep that when we're playing well. Like I said, where we have played well, it seems to end because there's a change of formation, or players that have played well have been put on the bench. So I'd like to see just consistency, some real consistency. And if we finish mid-table because we've gone on 3 or 4 games where we haven't won, but we've kept a formation that maybe different players are playing in, fair enough. But we need a system that is stuck to. Would be my big thing for next season. What else have we got? Miles Drake asked, of former players we've released without offering contracts to, who would improve us at the moment? Well, there's a long list there. Players that we've released without offering contracts to be quite honest, I don't know. I cannot remember who, because a lot of the time the better players we have offered deals to, but we knew that they weren't going to stay. Someone made a very good point the other day I saw online of a Lalkovic, Oztuma and Holden attacking midfield 3, which would be the most rogue signings to get Oztuma and Lalkovic in, which I know people always talk about. But to be quite honest, that would be a fantastic attacking 3 in League 2. Not that I see it happening at all. I just feel that we need a fresh start. So I wouldn't really look to players that we've had in the past. Unless, Bradshaw's coming back, but that's not going to happen. So yeah, I would like to see fresh faces, and moving away from signing players because we've had them before, which to be fair we did last season, and look where it got us. So that's that. Thank you all for the whole season. Once again, everyone's been fantastic. There's going to be a lot to come over the summer, hopefully a few more interviews with former players where I can get, and lots to digest as the retained release list and the manager situation progresses. On the manager, to sum it up in a couple of sentences, like I said before, I think we need a fresh start. Keeping a few players, but a fresh start, and I think that needs to be on the coaching side of things as well. I would get in a new face that can work with Fullerton, maybe someone that he knows, maybe someone that he has worked with and worked well with, although I don't know who that would be. And just let's hit the reset button, let's do it properly, and let's get players in early so that they can get proper pre-season in. None of the last minute signings that we are accustomed to. Right, thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you soon.